Thank you, Dr. Swenson, for the introduction. First part of our evening, we're just going to talk about some of the normal, everyday safety things that we do at Carmel High Schools. Some of the things that we probably take for granted because they just happen. We don't spend a lot of time focusing on them. We just routinely do them as part of our daily job. So I thought I'd start with what the state of Indiana requires us to do in the area of drills. The state requires one tornado preparedness drill each semester. They require a spontaneous fire drill at least one a month when school is in session. That would include summer school as well at the high school. And they also require one man-made occurrence, and typically that would be an intruder lockdown drill each semester. Those are the state minimums. I want to share with you what Carmel Clay Schools does, and we've done this for years. Minimum's not acceptable for us in this area, and so in the area of fire drills, we do the one drill every month that's required. But one of our drills each year must be done in the presence of the Carmel Fire Department. One of our drills must have a blocked exit or route so that the students and the staff have to make the decision to change their normal exit route spontaneously in case there would be a fire in that area sometime. And one of our drills must also simulate a fire during lunch. We typically in the past have avoided lunch because that's a sacred time when the kids eat, and we didn't want to bother them with that. But we also know that that'll be a different routine for our students. If there was ever a fire during lunch, they wouldn't be in their normal classroom, they may not have their normal teacher with them, and so we want to make sure that we're prepared to help our students respond in that situation. We also do 2 severe weather drills a year. One drill must also simulate lunchtime severe weather, and one of our drills must also simulate a recess or outside activity. We want to make sure that if our students at the high school are down at the football field during wellness, that they are able to hear us in a drill, respond in a drill, and have a place to go of safety. Also, our students who have recess outside, we want to make sure that they're able to hear the drill and know how to respond to that. We also participate in 2 earthquake drills a year, and one of those drills is conducted district-wide by the superintendent's office, and the other drill we just participated in recently is the Indiana Shakeout Drill, which is a nationwide drill that takes place each year. We also do lockdown drills. We do 4 drills a school year. Each drill must be conducted with our school resource officer in participation, and you'll hear more about our school resource officer program a little bit later tonight. One of those drills must be done to simulate lunch and recess outside activities. One of those drills must include sounding a fire drill during the lockdown because that has a whole different response to it. If a fire drill is sounded during a lockdown, there is a special response that the students and staff have for that. And each year, as a minimum, we have begun doing one spontaneous safety drill. That's where Dr. Swenson and myself show up, unannounced, hand a scenario to a staff member, and ask the students and staff to respond appropriately. We also do, in Carmel Clay Schools, canine drills each year. We do 3 to 4 drills a year that are a lockdown drill that can have up to 10 canine officers and their handlers from around Hamilton County. And we have just begun the new continuous canine searches at our secondary schools. Carmel Police Department just acquired a passive canine, and now that officer, as part of that officer's regular routine, will stop by our 4 secondary schools once every 2 weeks and just conduct a search. We are required by the state of Indiana, each one of our schools has a safe school committee. That school committee will routinely, as is required by law, every year review our safety procedures, make updates, and make sure that the staff is prepared to respond in any emergency situation. We also are required by the state of Indiana to have, for the school district, 1 school safety specialist. Director of Student Services, myself, is the designated school safety specialist for our district, but after next school year, we will have at least 1 school safety specialist in every one of our buildings. All our school resource officers are trained. At the high school, we have 3 or 4 school safety specialists. We just begun this year with our elementary schools. About half of them attended training this year. The other half will next year. And so by the end of next school year, each school in our district will have a trained school safety specialist. That does require about 6 days of training the first year, and then each year after that, 2 additional days of training are put on by the state of Indiana that we attend. We also have several sex offender notification procedures in place. Every one of our principals and the Director of Student Services are enrolled in the Offender Watch program. It is a program that you as citizens could also enroll in. It lets you know anytime a sex offender moves within a 2-mile radius of an address that you put in. We've put all of our school addresses in. I receive an email notification. Our principals receive an email notification. And our transportation department also receives an email notification to let us know if any offenders have moved into our school district. Last year, we also became one of the first schools in the area to pass a school board policy on sex offenders. We have procedures and policies in place that prohibit registered sex offenders from coming to our property during the school day and attending certain events after school. And if you've been to any of our schools, you know that we have a visitor check-in system. You are required to hand your driver's license to the office as you check in. They scan your driver's license, and that goes out and checks a National Sex Offenders Registry and gives us a pop-up warning if anyone would try to enter our schools that is on the registry. Some other safety considerations that Carmel Clay Schools has in place. We have the Anonymous Alert program that we've had for several years now. You might have seen that behind your My CCS. That is an opportunity for a student and a parent to let us know about a safety concern that's taken place in the school, and they can do that anonymously. We encourage them to give us contact information, but it's not required. If you fill out an anonymous alert, hit the submit button. Building principals get an email, Director of Student Services get an email, and the Carmel Police Department get an email as well. We run criminal history checks on all of our employees and all of our volunteers. That is a national criminal history report. And then also, if one of our volunteers has moved here from a foreign country, we also do criminal background checks from foreign countries. We have a video surveillance system in our school district. Several years ago, our Carmel Police Department wrote a grant that we participated in. We received quite a large bit of federal funding, and we were able to put video surveillance systems in every one of our schools in our superintendent's office. That system is accessible from the 911 emergency center. In the event of an emergency, they will turn on the cameras for that school, and they will use those cameras to guide emergency personnel into that building. Also, our school offices have access to the cameras, so does the central office, to all cameras in the district. And our administrators have the ability to access those videos from their cell phones. We lock all outside doors except the main entrance, and as you've probably heard, we are in the process of completing the installation of our door entry systems. The remaining doors will be installed this spring, and once they're done, all 15 of our buildings will have locked entrances during the school day. It's a doorbell system. You'll walk up to the doorbell, ring the doorbell. Someone from the office will answer that doorbell. You'll identify yourself and why you're at the school, and they'll buzz you in to come to the main office. And we also started this school year, all of our classroom doors are locked at all times. Now, they may not be shut, but that is one extra step that in the event of an emergency and an intruder enters the building, staff members do not have to find their keys, step out into the hallway, and lock the door. They just simply pull the door shut. Those extra seconds are very important in the event of an emergency. A couple other things. You've probably received communications from us before through the school messenger system. We bought that system originally as an emergency notification system. The good news is we don't use it for that very often, thank goodness. And so we send you weekly updates and things about the school. In the event of an emergency, you will be contacted by us. You'll get a tweet from us if you are signed up for that. You'll get a text message from us if you have signed up and given us permission to do that. If you haven't, you can still do that. You'll get an email. We will update our website, and you'll notice there'll be a red bar across the website that will let you know that there's an emergency taking place on our website. You will receive a recorded phone message from us letting you know that we have an emergency at the school. And if you are on Facebook, it'll be posted on Facebook. So as you can see, in the event of an emergency, once we make sure that the school's safe and that the students and staff are locked down and protected, we will notify you in the community of what's going on at the school. And now, I'd like to introduce Sgt Phil Hopson, who's going to talk to you about our partnership with the Carmel Police Department. And a big round of applause for Sgt. Hopson.
Wasn't ready, I thought I was last, so. Real quick, again, thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate that you taking the time to come out and let us discuss your child's safety with you as parents. I'd like to start out by introducing our school resource unit. The Carmel Police Department and Carmel Police School Corporations has had a school resource officer program since 2002, and where we started out with one officer, and we have expanded that program to where we have an officer in each of the middle schools, along with, on a daily basis, there are 4 officers at the high school. Lieutenant Jeff Horner is our boss, and he's a SWAT commander with our police department, so he offers a lot of tactical input into our training, and he lets us, in the summer, we get a lot of tactical training, and we'll go into a little bit of that in a moment. Again, my name is Phil Hopson. I'm a sergeant with the police department. I'm in my 19th year, and I worked 8.5 years as a patrol officer. I went back to criminal investigations, did some case follow-up, and have been working with the school in a few different capacities. I'm going into my 10th year, so I'm a super, super senior. But this, by far, is the most rewarding position that I've had in my law enforcement career, so I'm proud to be there to serve your children and the staff members here. Officer Wendy Bodenhorn. She is the SRO at Creekside Middle School, and she's also responsible for the elementary schools that feed into Creekside. And then Officer Greg DeWald, who is the SRO here at Clay, and again, he handles the elementary schools that feed into Clay Middle School. And then Officer DJ Sheff is at Carmel Middle School, and he again works with the elementaries that feed into that. I'm going to have Officer Sheff come up. He has a dynamic position, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about NASRO, which is our association. But I'm going to let him explain what NASRO is and go into a little bit of our training. And I know that a lot of what we're here, things that we want to talk about, are our response in the event of violence, and we will get into that. But I want to touch on a couple areas first. So, DJ.
Again, my name is DJ Sheff. I'm the school resource officer at Carmel Middle School. Part of what we do is we spend a great deal of time working with the National Association of School Resource Officers, and just recently the Indiana School Resource Officers Association. We work directly with them to try to collaborate with people all over the state of Indiana and all over the country in training as school resource officers, because it does create a different dynamic of being a police officer inside a school. So we do a lot of training with those two organizations. Just briefly, I'm going to talk about the 3 things that we do as school resource officers. NASRO trains on what we call a triad approach. The first and foremost, we are law enforcement officers. We're police officers. We're sworn by the city of Carmel. We respond to any law enforcement needs that are out there. But I think that we would all agree that we try to be, that being our last resort in everything that we do, contrary to what some might think. We spend a great deal of time leading up to trying to prevent that from occurring. The second thing we do is education, or a lot of times we do a lot law-related education inside the classroom. We teach drug prevention curriculum. Currently we're teaching a DARE program in 6th grade. We also teach a program in the 8th grade called It's Party Time and It's No Game. And great drug prevention curriculums. We also guest speak inside various classes as it pertains to Fourth Amendment, Constitution, all sorts of different things that we get involved with inside the classroom, and even sometimes in our elementary level, trying to get in to visit with some of the students there as well. The third thing we do as part of the triad approach, which is a significant part of our job as school resource officers, is a mentor, or sometimes referred to as an informal counselor. We are not a counselor by education by any means, but we're kind of that outside source that gives the kid an opportunity to come in and chat with us in a confidential manner, that we may not need to refer certain things if it isn't necessary to either law enforcement or, for that matter, even administration. Sometimes it's just a matter of them needing to come in and see an outside person and chat with someone that's in a different role, and just help kids make good decisions. And that's really what we are all about inside the schools, is trying to develop that positive relationships with kids and to help them make good decisions, so that years to come, they are coming back and chatting with us about the things that they've experienced. And that's why, I know Sgt Hopson said this, the reward that we have as school resource officers, as years go by, and I'm in my 6th year as a school resource officer now, seeing the kids move on, and those of you that are teachers get this, but having them come back and tell you what their experiences are and how things were different in middle school because of what we may have done or something of that nature, that's the benefit behind it. So I want you to know that we are working with people all across the country, and for that matter, actually globally now, where we're working with people to try to collaborate, find new ways to do things inside the classroom and inside our schools.
Thank you, DJ. I wanted to go through a little quickly some of the training, and this, as we get into it, our department, and I can assure you, we get a lot of training, and it's specifically dealing with active shooters. We've partnered with the schools now, and we put our entire police department through active shooter training response each year. So we use the simunition rounds, we go through scenarios, we as SROs go through job-specific training. So we do a lot of training from a police department as far as how we will respond in the event that there was violence in one of our schools. Again, Officer Sheff spoke extensively about the training that we go through our national association, which is all, and that goes from not only a tactical consideration as we talk about violent response, but it also goes to legality issues. The SRO position is very dynamic in that it's almost like a hybrid between a police officer and an administrator. So there's some legal updates that we have to keep on as far as search and seizure, arrest, and our roles and how those are defined legally. So we stay up to date on that training annually at our Nazareth conference. And then one thing we're very proud of, especially over the last couple of years, and we feel like we're on the leading edge of the school resource officer programs, not only in the state of Indiana, but my boss is gonna, because we've gotten a lot of recognition, but our agency was recognized as a model agency by the National Association. And when that application was submitted, they looked at all the things that we're doing with our corporation, and they recognized that our agency was one that they would consider a model SRO agency for other agencies to look at. Okay, and again, I always start out by saying I'm not an expert. I'm always careful when someone self-proclaims being an expert, but having 10 years of experience working with the schools, plus with all the dynamics that we have within our unit, the number one thing that always comes up in school safety, the most important factor besides, and we're going to talk about technology a little bit, and the human element, is about relationships. Tonight's an example, building that relationship with parents and communication, but more importantly, the students. And we could sit up here for a long time and talk about examples of kids that have come to us in that non-confrontational role, concerned about something that's going on in their lives, concerned about something that may be going on in a friend's life that they're concerned about, that we're able to follow up on. So the number one component is that relationship aspect, and that can mean a relationship from a parent being willing to express a concern to us, and that's that key is how we trust our instinct. And we as parents, if something doesn't seem right, you don't have to be a psychologist to analyze something. If you're worried about something, we always encourage, and it's the same with our staff members. If you're uneasy about a student, some behavior, some comments, a paper they wrote in class, a drawing they did, these are all examples of things we've dealt with. Please notify a counselor, please notify law enforcement. We all work together, and that's where that communication piece comes together. And again, I know I've stressed this, but this is number one, is intervening, being there to keep an eye on people who might need some assistance, and also have an ear available for a student that might need someone, an outlet, or someone to talk to. Dr. Dillon talked pretty extensively about some of the technological. So as you look at security and as we look at safety, we look at how we can improve in each of these areas. That's a living, breathing document. Every year we review that. We see what improvements we might be able to make, and then we work very hard to stay on that leading edge to deal with trends that we see and looking at structural and technology. There's obviously budgetary constraints, but that's something that we always look at, whether the way we use our cameras, the Guardian system, the door locks. So that structural technology, even down to, they call it crime prevention through environmental design, which is how do we build new facilities to make them more safe. And then we talked about this, planning. How are we helping? We use this joke as SROs, and we're trying to catch up with the fire department, but we don't want to write the math curriculum for your students, for your sons and daughters. You don't want us to develop that math curriculum. But as far as emergency response, that's what we're here for. It's a free resource for the school. Obviously, we all have tax dollars that go into that, but we try to use that as opposed to, sometimes there's areas where consultants come in, but we help with that planning. We help with the development of our emergency response plans. And then the training of our staff. That's something we're very involved with in the summer and throughout the year in staff development training, is training our staff on emergency. Maybe it could be drug recognition, behavior symptoms that we want to look for, legality issues of search and seizure, and then all the way down to how do we respond to an act of violence in our building. And I covered that again. And that one thing that we're getting into all the way down to elementary level is how are we training our students, how are we training our staff to respond to violence. The key, I know we're all wondering, because when the Sandy Hook shooting happened, that we got a lot of inquiries, and that's a horror that we can't think of, but we have to be prepared. And I always try to tell people, when we're dealing with our staff and our students, as we talk about active shooters, it's not something that we want to think about, that we want to talk to kids about, but it's not about paranoia, it's about preparedness. And I think we would all agree, I always like to draw the analogy to fire safety, because we have sprinkler, if there's a fire in a building, first of all, it would be very hard to burn a school because everything's fire retardant. We have sprinklers that drop out of the ceiling that put the fire out. We have alarms, we have lighted exits, push bar doors. Fire departments have done an awesome job with fire safety. We need to catch up and model that. We're not paranoid that our buildings are going to burn down. We're prepared. And I know Officer Sheff and I have spoken. He was doing a presentation at one of the elementary schools, I believe it was a 5th grade class, where the teacher was out of the room and a fire drill went off. Our kids know by the age, probably by 2nd grade, they could evacuate that building on their own without an adult being present. And the reason is because since they were little, we've trained them on fire safety. And that's where we're trying to get with violence, because the reality is there has not been a fire-related death in a school in the United States since 1958. Is that because fire is not a real threat, or is that because we're ready for fire and we put a lot of funding and training into that? And you can argue either side, but we're ready and know how to respond when there's a fire. Speaking specifically about active shooter response, just so you as parents don't think that Sgt Hopson came up with this great idea, there are recommendations, and I put these up here, from the federal government, from Homeland Security, from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and at the state and federal level on Homeland Security. They have specific guidelines on how do we respond in the event that someone's trying to harm us, an active shooter, an act of violence. And they have guidelines. And what we did 2 years ago was we brought our plan compliance with the school corporation and the police department to make sure that we're consistent with these guidelines. And we'll briefly touch on that. But these are the agencies that we look to as we developed our plans regarding active shooters. We use an acronym called ALICE, and I will briefly touch on what this is. This is not a step-by-step, but in the event that we were to face an active shooter, we have changed some things as far as how we get that information out. And in the past, we would just call it a lockdown, and that's all the information. And some of you as parents, depending what level your students are and how much technology they have, but we would have a lockdown if there was a bank robbery in a community, and we would go into lockdown if the bad guy was loose and the police are chasing them to ensure their safety. Well, we would just say lockdown. Staff and students lockdown, lockdown. And we'd have kids texting mom and dad, we're in lockdown, I don't know what's going on, and we'd have hundreds of calls to the school, which is understandable. Now we're providing that information. This is not a secret. The reason we go into lockdown is no longer a secret, nor should it be. We give information to our staffs. This is why we're in lockdown. There's a police action off of campus, and for safety reasons, we're in lockdown. So that's the A. The lockdown, we are enhancing that, and you heard Dr. Dillon talk about all doors are locked during the school day. So in order to go into lockdown, we just pull that door shut, or it's already shut and you're locked down and locked in. So we're also teaching barricading for our staff and students. So instead of just relying on a door lock, we're talking about different barricading techniques that our students can use. And we've heard some really creative ideas, but we are enhancing this each year as we go through how are we, thinking about things that are in the room that we can use to enhance our lockdowns. The information, again, Dr. Dillon talked about how we use our technology. We use a NIMS, the Federal National Emergency Management Guideline, in how our staff responds and the roles they play during an emergency. So we go through that training with our staff members. And then, as you've seen the counter piece of that, that's a piece that gets a lot of press, where you've heard bringing a book to a gunfight, or some of the other things that people sometimes are concerned about. In all of the active shooter response, here's the issue with this. When we talk about counter, and there's different language for different ages, but a counter is just saying as a last resort. Ironically, there was an article in the Indianapolis Star just today about this very issue, about fighting back. We would never, and I promise you, not one officer in here would ever tell your child, hey, everybody grab an iPod, we're going to go get this guy. That's not what that works. But as we go across the country and we say, in a lockdown, if there's a shooter in your building, what do you do? And most people say, we lock down. And that can be a great thing. But the problem is, if there's a shooter in the room, then lockdown is not an option. And we've had a lot of discussions about these. If it's a cafeteria, and there's a shooter in the cafeteria, which has happened. There's a shooter in the classroom, which has happened. We have people that will say, well, we lock down if there's a shooter. Well, if someone's in a room trying to hurt your child, lockdown is not an option for them, okay? Because that does not help them at that point. And we saw that on some of the medias in the recent shooting. We had kids say, well, our teacher locked the door, and we got in the corner and kept us safe. That can keep you safe, but if the shooter's in the room with you, that will not keep you safe. So we're working with our kids at the high school level on the evacuation component and the counter. The counter part is just as a last resort. If your life is in danger, you don't have to curl up on the floor in a storm position, a severe weather position. With little kids, how many of you parents in here have talked to your child about stranger danger? Okay, stranger danger is this. If a stranger ever tries to take you, you kick, scream, run, yell, get away from them at all costs. That's what and that's how we equate this with our kindergarten students. When we talk about rape prevention with older females or high school students, rape prevention is you kick, you bite, you scream, you yell, you fight. Those are both very aggressive responses to danger. Now, in the past, when we've taught our children in a lockdown, everybody get in the corner or get under the table, that's a very passive response. And we know not to go into details, but shooting is a skill. And anything that we can do to interrupt someone's ability to shoot accurately, and that can be as simple as getting up and running. And we always want to follow the lead of a teacher. But for those of you, and this is how you can help us as a parent, for those of you that have little guys and little girls that are kindergartners, it's just get up and run away from the bad guy. if there's someone dangerous, and these are the conversations we hope that our faculty members are having with our young students when we do our drills. But at the same time, at home, it can be a similar conversation. It's run. Can you get out a window? Can you run out a door if you're in a hallway and someone's trying to hurt someone? We don't use violent language with our very little students. As we get into high school, we do use terminology, shooter. If someone's trying to shoot you in the cafeteria, we don't tell our kids to get under the cafeteria table like we saw in Columbine, or under a table. If there's an exit and you can get out, you get out. Evacuation is a very high priority in the way that we train. If someone's in a hallway or a cafeteria or a bathroom and there's a shooting at the complete other side of the building and that information comes out, they have the option to run. And that's an important thing. We no longer give our staff and our students one response to all violence. We give them several options that they can exercise in the event that they're in danger. So we don't tell anybody what they have to do. We tell them several things that they can do. We talk about response to danger as fight, flight, or freeze. Probably the worst one you can do is freeze. A lockdown was a mandated freeze. Now we're saying you have that ability to run or fight. And what I welcome you is if you have questions about this concept as we're out here after the presentation, please come up and ask. We have had a lot of questions and have some very good answers for you, I promise. This is just a photo, and I kind of close with this. This is a photo of a classroom at Virginia Tech. And it was an adjoining to Norris Hall. And this is what, when the shooting was happening, the one young man that was interviewed said, I remember that a girl stood up and said, remember lockdown? And they all got in this position. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, if there's an imminent attack of violence, they're not prepared to give themselves the best chance to be safe in that position. The doors in that building did not lock. They didn't learn this at Virginia Tech. They learned it as little children in our K through 12 education, that in the event of danger, we get in a storm position. That's not an effective way, and this is what we're trying to get away from. It's taken years. All this proves is that training works. We've trained our kids that if someone's trying to hurt you, get in a storm position. That's wrong, 100%. Just like Columbine, the police used to come around the building, we would call the SWAT team and we'd wait 45 minutes, and then the SWAT team would get there. Well, these shootings or these acts of violence, they last 5 to 7 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. The average police response is 5 to 7. So a 3 to 5 minute situation, the reality is we want to empower our staff and our students to be able to protect themselves and not be victims before the big bad police officers arrive. Because many times when we get there, it's after the fact. Now, we have all kinds of components to prevent, to work with kids and to train kids, but the reality is in the event, as a last resort, when these occurrences happen, we want our kids to be empowered to make some decisions to keep themselves safe and not to always rely on the guys getting there or the cavalry arriving. So that's what, just to get away from this, and again, I always like this quote, because we have people that say, you know, what do we do? And there's example after example that we can discuss after this. But just making a decision and doing something as opposed to getting in a storm position and just sitting there is where we want to get. I encourage you, and this is part of that relationship, if you have questions or concerns or suggestions, we've had parents that work in the safety business in our community. Officer Chef and I responded to someone posted on Twitter that we weren't in there. So we went and visited their house to see if they had any suggestions. And that's an example. We care about your child's safety, and we'll go to whatever length it takes to keep them safe. And our contact information can be found on the City of Carmel's website. And we are all open to suggestions or questions, and would love to have reinforcement from you as parents as to what we're doing with your children, because I guarantee you that for all of us, your children, and I know they're your most prized possession, but when I go to work every day at the high school, I have 4,700 kids. That's a big family. And nobody's going to come into my building and hurt those kids without having to go through us. But I also, part of that is we want to train them to be able to have some response options to keep them safe. And I know every one of my SROs feels the same way. Those are our kids. If in the unlikely event that evil or danger comes to one of our facilities, we're going to meet them aggressively, but we're also going to have prepared your children to be able to protect themselves. So that's really all I have. I know there may be some questions about philosophies or things like that. Please, please, please come out and see us at the Carmel Police table. I'm going to have Jane Wildman come up and really listen to what she's saying, because if you have any concerns or identify any mental health issues, let somebody know. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jane Wildman, and I am the social worker that's in the 10 through 12 building at the high school. Mrs. Cartwright Bratton, right here, is the social worker who's in the freshman center. The other title that we use are the student services coordinator. But we are masters in social work. That is our focus. We are social workers. Now, how can we be proactive to help keep our students safe? Well, one of the most important things that any community member, whether it's a neighbor, a family friend, a parent, one of the most important things that you can do is to call an administrator or a guidance counselor or a social worker if you have any concerns about your student or another student in the community. We're there to follow up when we get these calls. If you see something, say something. If you're not sure who to call the social worker. It's not uncommon for us to have already met some of the students. Well, actually, we've met a lot of the students, but we might know the one you're referring to. And don't be afraid that, well, okay, I'm hesitant. What if it's not true? Well, if your concerns are proven false or not all as concerning as you might be thinking, it's no problem. Nothing goes on a student's permanent record unless it becomes a discipline issue. As I said, if you see something, say something. As you can see up here on the PowerPoint, this is the district counseling staff. We have 15 guidance counselors at the high school, and we have 2 student service coordinators or social workers, Abby and I. The middle schools each have 2 guidance counselors and 2 social workers. And the elementary schools have either a guidance counselor or a social worker. These people not only change schedules, but they change lives. This is just kind of a brief indication of some of the hats that the guidance counselors and the social workers wear. We monitor grades, attendance, discipline, and try to provide appropriate interventions. We connect students and families with outside community resources, whether it's food, clothing, therapists. We organize and conduct state standardized tests, ISTEP, ECA, AP. Of course, the guidance counselors and social workers attend IEP conferences, 504 conferences. They develop and coordinate support groups, whether it's there's a group of students who are going through a particular difficult time with maybe cancer in the family or a grief situation. We can provide some support groups for those students. Crisis intervention, of course, that is always, once something happens, we are notified right away. We're on the crisis team, and we are part of the original planning that goes into effect if there is something that's going to affect the school. Counsel students individually, whether it's social issues, grades, attendance, emotional issues, you name it, we've heard it. Parent education. Once or twice a year, we give a parent awareness night at the high school. Plus, we try to communicate with parents as much as possible. In my case, I much prefer to have a parent come into my office so I can meet them face to face than over the phone. Any way that I can communicate with a parent is only going to be beneficial for the student. College and career planning, and collaborate with teachers, administrators, and any staff to increase this positive support system that our students have. And the list goes on and on. There are actually 60 different categories that our guidance counselors at the high school split up, different duties that they split up. Okay? These are just some warning signs of potential mental health issues. I don't want you to go home thinking, oh dear, my child is having trouble sleeping and has nightmares, there must be a mental illness. No. All these symptoms would be for the situation where it's beyond a normal childhood development stage. It's not, and all kids are going to go through certain things. Are they going to have temper tantrums? Oh yeah. Even when they're 18, they're going to have temper tantrums. And the next one takes us to the late elementary and teen years. Some of these that I really want to point out are the sudden decrease in school performance, loss of interest in friends or family or activities, loss of appetite, excessive worry about weight gain, changes in sleep habits, prolonged sadness. Some of those specific ones might be an indication of depression. Some might be an indication of an eating disorder. But some that might concern us a little bit more, not concern us more, but on a different category level, of course, would be the substance use. But I want to skip down to the destructive behaviors, such as damaging property or setting fires. And you're going to see that again on the next slide. Withdrawal from family and friends. Now, as teens get older, of course, they want to be in their rooms, on their computer, on their phone, talking to their friends, listening to their music. And a lot of that is perfectly normal. It's when it's the extreme that you might want to say, ooh, this could be a red flag. Maybe we need to do some looking into this. Okay, the next slide is going to show you warning signs for potential violent behavior. These are the extremes. Of course, the withdrawn and antisocial behavior. But the big ones here, harming of animals and other aggressive or violent behavior. Harming animals, killing animals. That one, you absolutely need to notify somebody and try to get some help for that child. Maybe a student reacts to disappointment, criticisms, or teasing with extreme and intense anger, and blame or a desire for revenge. Again, this is a red flag to be aware of. Over on the other side, of course, fascination with weapons, wanting to hurt others. The top one dwells on experiences of rejection or perceived injustices or unrealistic fears. So often, you know, what I say a lot to parents is, okay, so your student thinks something's going to happen. And this is just in general, this is not with violent behavior, but your student might think that you're angry with them. But I'm not angry with them, says the parent. Well, it's about the student's perception. Their perception is their reality. It may not be real, but to them it is. Down towards the bottom, we have the couple of the big ones: fire setting, voyeurism. The three top ones to be aware of and to seriously consider appropriate communication with someone are the harming of animals, the fire setting, and the voyeurism. Okay. Now, in a situation, let's say if you come to me and you express some concerns, let me tell you what I do. First, I will go to the guidance counselor and the administrator and get as much information as I can. I might go to Sgt Hopson, our school resource officer. and see if he knows anything about the student. Or maybe another police officer that's in our building can check any records, any arrest records. We also have a probation officer of the high school, and I check with him about a lot of different situations. All right, so once I've gathered the information, and sometimes before I gather the information, because if I can't find those people in a timely fashion, I will meet with that student. I will sit down, try to build a rapport. You know, you're not in trouble, I just want to, get to know you. Move on from there. I'll do an assessment. Once I've done that assessment, I'll take my assessment and communicate with the appropriate people, whether it's the parents, guardians, police, administration. From that point on, I take it and communicate where I need to be. Everybody has to report, and this includes all adults. If you know of somebody who's going to hurt themselves or someone else, by law, we're required to report that. And I can't stress that enough. Don't be afraid, oh, I might get them in trouble. No, you might actually be helping them. One of the last things I want to tell you is, that's so important for parents, is try to maintain a positive relationship with your student. Now I know that in high school, that can be very, very tough. However, I have a sign in my office that says, if you want to see eye to eye, use your ears. Don't be afraid to listen to what the student has to say. You might be surprised. And then the other advice that I give parents and students, this goes two ways, is try to use what we call I messages. For example, I feel hurt, or I'm frustrated, or I'm disappointed. As opposed to, you make me very frustrated, you really, really make me angry. When you use you, it puts the other person on the defensive. Try it with adults too. It doesn't matter. Adult to student, student to student, student to parent, adult to adult. The more you can use the I messages, you're taking on and not putting it on the other person. Well, the bottom line to all this is maintain as good a relationship as you can with your student. And most importantly, if you see something, say something. And with that, Dr. Swenson.
Thank you all. Before I bring this to a conclusion, I'm going to ask our colleagues who are going to be available in the cafeteria area to move now so you can get set up. And so just to go ahead and just walk on. But for the parents, before I conclude, look for, when you get into the cafeteria, if you have additional questions, look for the individuals from your child's school, look for our resource officers, or certainly look for me or for Dr. Dillon. We'll be happy to go through questions you may have. By way of conclusion, I'm delighted and very appreciative, moms and dads and fellow citizens, that you're here. And my conclusion is to emphasize, first, I hope that you picked up one of these very quick yellow refrigerator items. If you didn't, we have plenty outside. And they really help us emphasize three quick things. First, trust your instincts. If you think something's wrong, as Ms. Wildman said, certainly our police officers and all of us educators would know, if you think something's wrong, if you see something wrong, say something. It's A-okay. All of us working together, as we've tried to demonstrate this evening, really lead to a very secure, safe, and positive environment at school, at home, and in our community. Second, talk to your child at home. If nothing else, just talk about, gosh, well, what have you learned about the safety drills, any one of them that you learned about, that go on at school? And last but not least on this list, please make sure that you or your kiddo or you together talk with your counselor or your social worker at school. They're a tremendous resource. They're very positive, and things don't have to be wrong, and you don't have to have a schedule change. What you really want to do is help change lives and help be positive, safe, and secure. The other thing that I'll conclude with is, this really is a very comprehensive effort in our school corporation. We spend a great deal of time because, as fellow parents, we too feel and regard your children as our children, at least for the time that we're with them and they're with us. So please know that we take that very seriously. All of the people that are outside waiting for your questions will help identify good ideas, will help provide good information, and we will always be working tonight and forever on secure and safe schools, because those learning environments lead to great learning and great outcomes for our kids. Thank you so much, and we'll all head out to the cafeteria for discussion, and we hope that IU wins the game later tonight. Thank you.